Hi, thanks for listening to Crafting Human and being part of our creative tribe. If this conversation resonates with you, please share the episode. Liking and subscribing helps me to keep telling the stories of the creatives who bring soul into our world. If you want me to dive deeper on anything discussed today, let me know in the comments. I'd love to bring those conversations to you in future episodes. Now, on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Crafting Human. It is my absolute delight and pleasure to introduce you to today's guest. His name is David Leventhal. He is a visionary, an entrepreneur, a regenerative designer, and the founder of Playa Viva, a 200-acre luxury resort destination 30 minutes outside of Zihuatanejo, Mexico. This wonderful project is built around these life-giving principles of regeneration, making land and community healthier over time. He is also the co-founder of Regenerative Travel, I think also known previously as Regenerative Resorts, and this is a global network that helps independent hotels shift from doing less harm to making positive impacts through place-based community-led hospitality. I would consider him kind of the tip of the spear in being on the front lines of this really transformative industry. And with his background in sales, marketing, and technology, David has spent over 2 decades really crafting and weaving together capital, care, and systems thinking to really bring about business as a force for ecological and social transformation and renewal. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation with him, hear about his journey and the lessons he's learned being at the front lines in the trenches. I recall a conversation where he was pulling together parts from hurricane damages and working on, rebuilding the resort, with his own hands. But ultimately, at the end of the day, using travel to help restore people and the planet. So, welcome, David.
Sharon, thank you. You make me sound actually competent at something. So,
Well, you can't do what you've done without bringing competence, ingenuity, and just resourcefulness in your own two arms, just getting right in there. And I just think you have a wealth of information and wisdom and learnings that you can share with my listeners. So I wanted to just, before we even dive into like who you are and your background, for the purpose of this conversation, I really wanted to kind of level set what are we talking about when we use the word regeneration, because it is becoming this new buzzword. It's a little bit kind of becoming trendy, if you will, and being used alongside sustainability, the word sustainability. And of course, there's nothing wrong with the word sustainability, but it's now been associated with so much greenwashing. And, there's a lot of these negative connotations. So now we're all jumping on regeneration. And I wanted for our listeners to really get a different understanding, or maybe, an alternate perspective of what regeneration really means and what it does. And maybe in
well,
like a walnut in a nutshell
yes.
kind of a
Well,
definition.
yeah, in the smallest nutshell, regeneration's the new black, right? Um, it's a paradigm shift. It's a different way of thinking about things, and you see these graphs which talk about going from kind of green and doing less damage to sustainable and kind of maintaining things as they are to regeneration, which is making things better. But it goes further than that and much deeper. But I think the key is meeting folks wherever they are, and the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and it's about kind of moving up that kind of line, moving, to be more and more regenerative. Core to me in regeneration in this paradigm shift is moving from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, which I think some of that will come up as we talk. Another part is kind of process, which is this whole systems thinking, honoring people, honoring place. Um, there's a lot to regeneration, but as I said, for me, the key is having people kind of move along that path. And the more they realize they don't know, hopefully, the more they realize they want to know and the action they want to take. And a lot of this is, what is our impact as humans on the planet?
Mhm.
One of the definitions I hear about regeneration often too is creating uh, the environment for life to thrive. So,
Mhm.
but to me, that's kind of basic in a way, in the sense that, you know, that's what we exist in. The question is maybe the word thrive there, and what does that really
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
not just humanity, but everything that's associated
Yeah.
with and that we rely on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, thank you for that. And I really, when we first met, I was at this point in my own career where I was just experiencing major burnout and wanting a different way of like, if I'm constantly feeling this, but also feeling this tug toward there must be a way in which I can do what I love and feel like I'm thriving and not bringing harm to the planet. And, how do I get out of the cycle of this like transactional mindset and things like that? And I just remember when I read the white paper that you wrote with Anna Pollock and Bill Reed. I just felt like it just like touched something in my soul that I felt like this is the way, it's so life-giving, this perspective. And I think on a very macro level, from like a project view, it was life-giving, but also just individually, when you look into yourself as well, ourselves, that there is that a desire for that alignment. And I was wondering if you could share maybe a little bit of this. Who was David Leventhal before he embraced this regenerative way of living and doing life and business and all this, and how what did this shift even begin to look like in that journey?
wow, how much time do we have? Um, I was born. No, I think the transformation for me was very very similar to that line, where I did
Yeah.
start out as kind of this frat boy, really unaware of the impact that the decisions I was making, the negative impacts they had on the planet. Um, my ex-wife Sandra Kahn, her mom's a big environmentalist, and through them we met a biologist who was doing a study of jaguars in Mexico, and through, to make a long story short, ended up going down to Mexico and got involved with that and setting up a conservation easement program to keep the native populations as owners of the property, but putting the flora and fauna in a conservation easement. And in kind of becoming a conservationist and looking out over these huge tracts of land and trees and all the kind of the umbrella species of jaguar and the biomass underneath it, you go, wow, I'm part of doing something big. And then you go to Costco and you come back with, batteries and packaging that big, and you go, wait a minute, this doesn't align. And
Yeah.
so you really begin to look at, it's not just these big actions that you do, but it's all the little tiny decisions you make on a day-to-day basis. And then from really a conservationist, I give credit to a guy named Sean Paul, who we're still friends, and he's was with a group called Ecologics. And what he was saying to me is, look, just because you put a fence around an area and call it a preserve doesn't mean you're actually preserving it, because people around there are poor and they don't have the resources. They're going to go in and illegally log and illegally hunt jaguars and sell pelts and to try to make a living. And so you have to deal with the people problem and not just, the environmental part. And so that's when I became not just a conservationist, but I would say a social and environmental impact person, and became much more aware of not just the conservation activities we do, but how people's role plays in that. And Then Sandy, my ex-wife, went off to Greenbuild and met Bill Reed and engaged them in the building of Playa Viva. And Bill, um, really, he's the leader of a group called Regenesis and was developing in a regenerative way. And so working in a regenerative way and whole systems is really just a continuation of conservation and then social and environmental impact to really look at things from a whole systems standpoint. So that's really been that evolution. And really every day that we operate Playa Viva, interact with the community, interact with the place, and operate as a regenerative business, I learn more and more about what it is to be truly regenerative, and the actions we take that I take and the decisions made. So it's a daily process.
I'd imagine. I mean, and I love how even in your earlier comment you said it's, the more you're learning, the more you realize the less you know. And I think that is part of the process of growth and evolution and, adaptation to, a constant changing environment and needs and so on and so forth. And that it's not just a singular moment, right? And that's something that I've really have embraced very much even in my own life ethos, outlook, what have you. So can you take me back to when you all went to this beautiful land and you saw it? Where were you at in your life and what was kind of happening around business and how you were doing your how you were building your life and what when you got there and arrived there, what was the aha moment that you said, I really want to build something here?
Yeah, this was mid 2000s, the go-go days of real estate, pre the whole 2008 global collapse, and we had a place in Troncones. I was working in high tech at the time and kind of visiting a property that we had in Troncones, which is north of the airport, or
Okay.
Guanero and Playa Viva South, so they're kind of equidistance from the airport. And we had bought land there and built what we thought was a green home to align with our values, and began renting it out so folks could the people that work there could make a little extra money from tips and meals. And we're kind of buying land as we saw the values go up and flipping it. And we were going to buy the land next door to us and take this little Airbnb and turn it into a hotel. And the land was just way too expensive. And then uh, through our accountant, heard about the land that is Playa Viva. It's 200 acres, as you mentioned, a mile of beachfront. Turns out as an archaeological site and a turtle sanctuary and other things. And so we had really thought about building something there. And part of the reason why we wanted to go there as opposed to Troncones was Sandy had a really strong sense of community and building community, and that there was a lack of community. And she liked these concepts of co-housing and planned communities that allowed people to meet and congregate. And so that was really the original vision to build there. I think T-shirt one of Playa Viva is like Playa Viva, uh, a sustainable community and boutique hotel. We didn't even use the word
Oh,
regenerative because we
yeah.
just thought nobody's going to know what that means.
Yeah.
Uh, this is 2000, as I said, 2006, 2007. But brought in Bill Reed and team and did this process where what you really need to do is let go of the idea of what you're going to build there and do this 360-degree study of the property and create these layered maps that have the geology, the soil, the archaeology, the anthropology, the spoken word history, the water, the food systems, the energy, the sun, the moon, the flora, the fauna, everything laid out and layered. And the way I describe it is there's that little kid game you play with, like, give me a number, give me a color, and you
Yeah.
unfold it, and then it tells you, like,
Yeah.
that is kind of the process of regeneration, where by layering all these maps, it unfolds what should be there. And that's something that I've really begun to learn. It took me a long time and still learning it is kind of my role is to listen deeply to place and what that place needs.
Yeah.
And, part of this honoring place and history of place is what Bill told me early on, Bill Reed, was, you know, in most cases, humans are going into a place that's been degraded by humans. And if we can understand how it got degraded, then we can understand our role in bringing back the abundance that was once there. And so that's really our process and what we do. And that's
Mhm.
also part of regeneration. I like to take that all the way back to kind of biblical days when I say,
Mhm.
you know, in Exodus and how the story of how the earth got created, and then there's a statement of, and God gave man dominion over all of its creation. And in going back to the original text, and I'm not a biblical scholar or anything like that, but in talking to folks who know this more than I do, they say dominion isn't the right word. And that dominion is a word we use now, which I think fits into that old paradigm of us controlling, extracting, right? And that the real word is closer to stewardship or having to take care of and be responsible for. And so humans have a very important role in nature, but it's in nature and part of nature and not apart from. And I think one of the things we see a lot in hospitality or just in our lives is how we seal ourselves off from and create these hermetically sealed environments away from nature and disconnected from nature, and how that disconnects us from nature. Whereas I think what we do at Playa Viva and what Sandy and I were trying to do in our own lives is to be more connected to nature, connected to place, connected to people, connected to community. And so I I don't know if there was a aha moment. It's kind of a series of continual ahas
Yeah.
about, you know, creating that set of core values, defining those, setting them down, and then working towards creating a place that promotes those core values. And you'll see those core values on Playa Viva's site, or core principles, which is part of the regenerative process.
Mhm. So were you always, I mean, there's so much you said there that I wanna unpack, but, like, there's a question that I have was,
Sorry about
uh
that. I'll keep it
no,
simple.
I love it because, I mean, everything, the stewardship, being a not a part from nature, but a part of nature, right? Were you always kind of in this mindset of, "I wanna be a steward of the land, I wanna do business this way," and
Well, again, I don't think you consciously go, I'm all in on an old system. I think you are kind of born in and bred in, and that's the only thing that you know until
yeah.
some point where you go, no, this isn't the only thing there is. And as you begin to move down the regenerative path, you realize that it is, as I said to begin with, a paradigm shift. And so
Mhm.
once that paradigm shift happens, then there is an old system. But until then, there's only one system, the system you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I, just going back to what you said about being a steward as well, I just love that that idea so much because, even like the indigenous people here in the US, they were stewarding the land and taking care of it, and their involvement, or even us, right? Like how we protect our parks, and how I, on my own little micro world, how I cultivate my husband and I, we have what we call our little urban homestead with this little micro garden in the front and chickens that we've, made a coop that runs around the whole property. And it's amazing, like you're saying, how that's invited community into our life. Just naturally people are drawn to it and they want to be a part of it. And hey, I mean, we really like have people bringing produce to our house now because we've take the abundance of what we have that just the land produces. We put it out on this little stand, and it just sounds like, I mean, maybe in some perspective before I even lived it, it felt very idyllic, and, um, but when you start slowly doing this, you begin to see it's not just idyllic, it's actually can be possible. So, it was
Yeah.
something that,
The amount of food produced in a small plot is mind-blowing.
it uh, yeah, we have literally Christmas tree size cucumber plants right now, and it's a bumper crop of cucumbers for just as one produce, and the corn and the tomatoes and all of it. It's just people
Time
are
to start pickling. So,
pickling, sauces, all of that. That's exactly what's happening. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about, just even from my perspective, I've been in hospitality design most of my life. And, I think um, just in a very practical business sense, I would love to hear your thoughts on how you approached the business. You talked about understanding these different maps and layers, and there's sort of a new framework in which you are maybe setting up your business plan and your metrics and the KPIs and all these kinds of things. Can you take us through sort of the process that you went through to form your business strategy along with all these other stakeholders and within this new kind of a living system?
well, I mean, I think if I told you that we started out as hoteliers from the get-go and that we had, our ADRs and, our business plan all set out to be out, I'd be lying to you because as I mentioned to begin with, we started out with the idea of creating a community, and what we built were model homes, and we were going to be selling fractional ownership in those homes to create that community. And we opened in November of 2008 when the global economic collapse happened and people were losing their homes.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
I think, you know, the core to many businesses, and if this were the how I built this podcast, it really is about pivoting. It's about understanding the value of the resource you have and
Yeah.
adjusting accordingly. And we just went through COVID, right?
Yeah.
Like COVID is not something that fits on a business plan for a hotel for anybody, and it's how you pivot and adjust to it that can work either for you or take you down. So I think overall, what I do want to say is, you can operate a business regeneratively. And the way I look at it is very similar to the garden. I'm glad you brought that garden example up, right? You know, if you don't have good dirt,
Mhm.
you're going to be paying a lot of money to put nutrients into that dirt so that it creates the environment for those cucumbers to grow. But there's a heavy cost in all those outside inputs that go into it. And the way I look at our business from a regenerative standpoint is, and a lot of this you see in a film like Kiss the Ground, is how do we create really fertile soil? How do we create soil that is full of life so that I don't have to put those and invest in all those outside elements so that it creates all that cucumber, all that revenue that comes out of it. And so
Mhm.
that's a lot of how we look at our business. And so, while we're investing heavily in or invested heavily in the social environmental impact side of what we do and the farm and food hub and farm to table program, a lot of the reason that people come to Playa Viva is that we do align with their values
Yeah.
and we are helping the local community and they do get to engage with the local community at a very honorable way, and
Mhm.
they do get to eat local food that is full of nutrients, it's sourced locally. And so it is about that process of the degradation, reinvesting in creating that fertile soil so that it then provides the abundance off of the business. So we recently spun out Recimar, which is regenerating from Sierra de Mar, the whole social environmental impact part of what we do. So that's a self-standing model. So that is something that is being funded partly by 2% regenerative trust that Playa Viva charges all of our guests, but now it's being funded by uh, um, philanthropy. Many of them are guests, um, and many of them are uh, brought in from the outside who really want to be involved in projects that are creating more resilience in watersheds and working with people. So, you know, from a business standpoint, what we're looking at is how do we reinvest in creating that fertile soil? And that does involve things like, from a metric standpoint, um, deciding to get B Corp certified
Yeah.
and then learning from that process and learning how can we become a better business because of what B Corp is asking of us as a business. Um, but yeah, we do budgeting like any other business. Right
Mhm,
now, there's a kind of a global slowdown in travel
mhm.
because of the uncertainty of economics. We had a session on regenerative travel with a bunch of hotels worldwide called the Trump Slump, where hotels all over from Africa to Asia, Europe, Americas were all saying they were seeing about a 10 or 20% drop in travel. And so we have to
Right.
plan against that. And develop strategies just like we did when we first opened, just like we did with COVID, on how to pivot and expand our market at the same time.
You know, each time you're having to pivot and reevaluate and, potentially reinvent, evolve, the approach to business or, um, you know, the approach to how you're marketing or anything like this. I mean, the flip side of that is the I would I'm suspecting is I mean, especially when there was the whole global financial collapse, "Oh my gosh, what's just happened?" Um, I mean, what was that like for you to go from that initial I mean, what were you feeling in that initial moment when you had just, I'm sure, invested this money and made this plan and decided to do it this way, and then the the process of getting to the pivot and the aha moment to say, "Well, you know what? Actually, let's take a look back at what we've got," because I think it's really interesting because we're also kind of in that time right now where there's this rapid change happening. Um, Technology is moving faster than we can even keep up with. Um, just to your point now, travel is down. And like the world in which we're living in right now is every morning you're waking up to a brand new headline of well, didn't expect that, or how are we going to now do this whole thing? But
Yeah.
just as a business owner and as a human being, I would just love to hear, what are some of these principles of like the regenerative way and the mindset that you've, really been growing in, that you've applied into all these different areas. And would love to hear that because I think that's just as in life, as there's just so much wisdom in that too.
Well, I think in those particular instances, a lot of it's just plain, you know, we're entrepreneurs, we're business people, we adapt,
Mhm,
we change, we move.
mhm.
We look at what is the core underlying asset that we have, and how can we leverage that to a positive. So, for example, during COVID, um, I was calling around to different folks and had a relationship with Ruben, who started a glamping site, and Playa Viva at one point kind of was the banner, our little treehouse. And asked Ruben, what are you seeing out there? And he said, yeah, March, boom, everything dropped off. April, but by May, uh, glamping locations that were within 2 hours and 57 minutes. I remember like the detail of it, like how
Uh-huh.
detailed that was. He didn't say 3 hours. From a major metro, we're seeing 90, 95, 97% occupancy rates.
Wow.
And I was like, oh. Okay. Well, air flight wasn't an option, and most of our audience was American. But what we did is we just had turned off all of our marketing and said, okay, let's turn on our marketing on Facebook because it's big in Mexico to communities that are within a 4-hour driving distance, figuring we'd get the average of 3 from that, and start promoting Playa Viva as this place that is outdoors, that's glamping. You're connected in nature, which is what we wanted back then, or thought we wanted, or thought that was okay. And yeah, we pivoted based on having that knowledge and connection to the marketplace. But is that regenerative in nature? No. Is the fact that we were kind of connected in nature the right thing at the right time, at the right place? Yeah. And then once people could get on a plane, where do they want to go? They want to go to places like Playa Viva. And we did a big expansion uh, kind of when we were closed down, so that when things opened back up, we would be able to accommodate that. So it's a combination of just old fashioned blocking and tackling, business pivoting, along with doing something that aligned with our values and is in a regenerative way.
Yeah. What I really love is just the idea of how, in many ways, all these sort of seemingly insurmountable obstacles have kind of allowed you to be able to really develop Playa Viva into what it is today. But can you tell me a bit about, like, just even how the design of the resort took shape and what was the vision and who were your creative partners in the process of the planning?
Yeah. Well, the original kind of design idea that evolved out of the design charrettes with Regenesis was to build tree houses. Irie Cunliffe was the architect design there. And the idea was this once was or still is a coconut grove. So transplanting palm trees from the coconut grove in the back to be living piers holding down providing a vegetative fabric support to the dunes, and then
Mhm.
building tree houses on those. And we did some treehouse tests, and they could each hold about 2 tons. We had them in kind of trees of threes, so we could do 6 tons. It's like, okay, nothing we're going to build on top of them. It's going to be more than 6 tons. They're fine. But our transplant rate of trees was not above 50%. So it took us a couple of years to figure out how to do it at a 99% effective rate. So some of our early treehouse designs kind of turned into homes on stilts in a way.
Okay.
Since then, we've gone back to treehouses. Michelle Lewis, who was the architect who worked with us on Playa Viva, who is in Tepoztlan, who is more of a design build architect, did the design off of Irie's idea that is really to take the vernacular, what is local materials, everything from, the paints are mud. So you've got all these natural tints, which give you a wonderful feeling. Eventually, we did do a treehouse. It was designed by Kimshasa Baldwin, built by Artistry, and it is iconic. And it got us, along with Regenerative Travel, on the cover of Travel and Leisure magazine.
And this
And
is this the, kind of like the tubular structure that
yes,
is. Yeah. Oh,
exactly.
it's so beautiful.
It's stunning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Kim Shasta did a great job with that. And then when we went to do our next set of tree houses and expand, um, Kim Shasta, bless her heart, she did a great job designing the whole expansion, but I really wasn't happy with the design she did for the next tree houses. Kind of like, freshman album was so good. How do you go from there? And so I'd met Louis and Olaf with Nomadic Atelier, and they did this great design for a manta ray inspired treehouse that was inspired by a drone video of a squadron of manta ray right off Playa Viva.
Oh, wow.
And if you've seen these kind of pitched roofs, and they're just beautiful rooms, and those are built in trees and in the palm trees, and they're absolutely gorgeous and stunning to be in, and very kind of in nature, but very eco-lux and luxury at the same time. So we've had different architects work. Andrea Studio O just kind of took that design up a level, and we did our first air-conditioned building with we call it the Infinity Casita. So it takes that same pitch roof, but really turned it more into the Infinity type design. And that we used not only bamboo, but then we used a manufactured wood, kind of compressed wood uh, that uses like there's no glues on it. The resins from the sawdust become the glue, so that allowed us to
Wow.
pre-manufacture what I'll call the room, and then
Mhm.
set that onto the beams, the bamboo structure. So we've at every phase we're kind of testing new ideas and doing different things, but we're always looking at the first thing we do is a sun study. Where is the sun coming in and has it changed? Like our turtle yoga originally was kind of raised up on either side. And then we did the sun study. It's like, oh, nope, brought this down. And then when that design evolved, it turned into this beautiful turtle. So it's the turtle yoga. So again, inspired by nature. And then beyond sun is wind. How do we leverage the wind coming off the ocean, Venturi effect, and natural design there. So it's um, that along with the materials that are selected all the way down to, local muds that give us the paint colors.
Wow, that is, um, I'm amazed by the kind of the innovation that you've been bringing into the projects, and not just innovation, but it's like the innovative thinking. And then along with, as time has been evolving, we are seeing new kinds of materials. Like you're talking about this resin glue from the sawdust. It's quite remarkable to hear about the creativity and the resourcefulness of the ideas that designers are bringing to you, as a solution for some of the different changing needs. What's been some of the I'd love to hear, like, what have been some of the kind of along with in the vein of thought of this, the sawdust turning into glue, how have you been sourcing, kind of, kind of being the resourcefulness that you would need, to source all of your interior products or your amenities and the design and the structure and all the materials? How can you talk us through some of the process of discovery and, trial and error, maybe even at just some level?
Well, I mean, they all kind of evolve. We started out with EO products from the US as an organic soap and shampoos and lotions. And then eventually we're able to find somebody local in Mexico, B Corp, that we could source locally. We love EO products, but again, we want local. Same thing with sheets and towels. Eventually we found a um, company out of Veracruz that was manufacturing organic sheets. The cotton came from Texas, but still, it a lot the manufacturing is Mexican,
Mhm.
and so a lot of it's finding products, sourcing them. You don't often do it immediately because you've got the kind of immediacy of opening sometimes, and don't have the luxury to really, you know, discover and wait. Um, and But a lot of our kind of design artifacts come from the state of Michoacan next door, where there's good copper work and some of the kind of detailed textile work that comes out of Oaxaca. So many things, our plates come from Capula in Michoacan as well. So we're trying to source as much as we can locally. Um, our LED lights, unfortunately, they're not from there. And our solar panels are sharp panels from Japan, the batteries, yeah. So there's some things that don't come from Mexico, but we try to source as much as we can locally. Like, one of the things that happened recently is we had from a food standpoint, not just an architecture standpoint, a sommelier who said, David, you guys have a farm table program, but your wines are from Chile and Italy, and why do you not have Mexican wines? I was like, well, are there good Mexican wines? She was like, oh my God, there's amazing, great Mexican wines. So it's been a process of converting our wine list over to being all Mexican. I'm going down to Valle de Guadalupe to visit one of our lead wineries, Venacaba, and then explore others. But there are wonderful natural organic wines in Mexico that we've been able to add. So it's a process like everything else. It's a wonderful discovery process. That's kind of the
Yeah.
fun, and finding those individual people, businesses, communities that are committed to doing that as well.
I um I love that because I came upon on your website doing some research that do you have a 2-star Michelin rated what is
So
can you
yes,
talk about this? What is
yeah,
this?
we can talk about it. We received a plaque in the mail from Michelin. It's called Two Keys.
Mhm.
Michelin, as you know, has the star program for restaurants. But
Yeah.
recently, I think with the acquisition of Tablet Hotels, they've added keys where they're going in and evaluating hotels and markets. And we were lucky enough to be one of the hotels that was awarded two keys. I think there were over 100 that got like one key, a couple dozen that got two keys, and a handful that got three keys. So, and
Wow,
it's and
congratulations.
we didn't know about it. I mean, they show up, and from what I understand, they don't just send one person; they send two different people to get a variety of perspectives on it.
Yeah.
So yes, that's been wonderful. So
Wha that
between
is
B Corp
wonderful.
certification, the two keys with Michelin, we recently got Mex Best award. We've won the Fitur award. The wall of shame is starting to fill up.
Well, I mean, that says a lot when, do you feel like there's been any is there anything in among these, accolades and awards that you've received where you feel like, "Wow," where you kind of have this moment of it's a proud moment for you where you say, "Wow, me and the team, we're doing this," you know? What did
Yeah.
you when was that kind
Well,
of moment for you?
I, I obviously when you get it, it's like wow, and a lot of it has to do with you start out doing something different, right?
Yeah.
Trying to source locally, committed to social impact, environmental impact in the community, supporting a farm to table program, not having single use plastics on the property, on and on and on. And you do that because it aligns with your values, not because you're a hotel, you're trained out of the sustainability school.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, wow, is what we're doing going to resonate with people? And so, yeah, the number one vote is that people come, that they come back, that they love it. So that's the best kind of accolade. Getting these accolades like the Michelin is good because it's the industry agrees with you.
Right.
The industry says, wow, we love what you're doing. And yeah,
Mhm.
I'm exactly as you said it. I'm really proud for our team. Look what you guys accomplish. These are people who have never held a job or never worked in hospitality, and they're just being hospitable,
Yeah.
welcoming you to their home.
Mhm.
And for them, yeah, I more than anything else, those accolades mean more to me about our team than anything else.
Yeah. Um, I'd love to pivot towards, like, the conversation around community
Mhm.
and, the community that you're building. Did you even think that this was going to be possible when you first started this journey? I mean, because 'cause you're bringing in economic, kind of a new energy into the economy for the job empowerment, job creation, the social impact you're making within the local community, but also kind of into the whole of the larger picture of, like, the watershed. I mean, there's so much that you're doing. The ripple effect of the existence of this property, um, in the immediate community and then kind of even beyond into the region has been really profound. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about some of that.
Yeah, I mean, when you start something like this, you really have no idea. how what you're going to do is going to impact you. You have a general idea that you want to help people out, and sure, you bring jobs, and it's not just about jobs, but quality jobs. Um, and then it's like, okay, what are the things that are important to us? Education is important to us, and environmental education is important to us. Supporting the turtles that were already there, et cetera, et cetera. But then there are the things that are the triple ripples, the things that you had no idea you're going to do. And one of the stories that's an example there is um, the women's co-op. I mean, it started out where we needed somebody to help us out with making coconut oil for the masseuses to for their massages. And this woman, Gabby, kind of was going through a hard time in her life at that point and said, you know what, I need to do something. And so she got involved in doing that. And then she got deeper involved in bringing some of the medicinals in her garden, turmeric, moringa, et cetera, onto our farm and beginning to propagate that and developing that. And then other women were like, hey, Gabby, it looks like you're having a good time. We want to be part of that. Right. And so next thing
Yeah.
you know, we've got close to a dozen women that are involved in a women's co-op that's being supported by our guests to help them create teas and these medicinals and coconut oil, the original product, and marmalades and so much more. And yet the deeper part of that story is we were meeting in circle with some of our donors and hearing from the women, the women's cooperative. And what came out, I thought as a business person, wow, here's a way for them to develop more economic freedom and blah, 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 blah
Hmm.
from it. What was really, really important to them was a safe space for women.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
exactly. And so if you ask me back in 2006 when we bought the land, were we going to be creating a safe space for women in the community? Absolutely not. And so this is really a shout out to Legacy Works Group, which I'm on the board of, which works in communities, developing communities and environment leadership. And it's this kind of spiral idea where one thing spirals out to create something else, which creates something bigger, which creates something even bigger. And the Women's Co-op is just one example of what are becoming many, many stories around that triple ripple.
The just creating that safe space for women. I mean, I just love that. It's and I'd imagine as a result of that, a safe space for their families and, so on and so forth. The ripple effect of that in their lives, in their world is just going to be, you know,
Yeah, I
life
mean,
life changing.
we recently had through another donor um, who does a lot of work with community banks
Mhm.
um, and kind of community where they fund
Like a
um,
microfinancing or
like a
something?
microfinance type model. Yeah,
Mhm.
and they came in to do a training with us, and the women from the women's cooperative, they just jumped right on it and were leaders in this, and the women who organize this and do this in communities throughout Mexico were blown away by what they saw in our community is the strength of the community texture there that had been created that allowed their program to thrive quicker, better, faster results. So this is part of that whole like regeneration and investing in soil, right?
Yeah.
So that when other
Yeah.
things come in, you've got this resilient, stronger soil to begin with. So
Yeah, and the ecosystem I mean, like, you've been planting really good seeds, right? And so therefore the ecosystem is now almost like it's like the self-perpetuating feed loop of just this positive kinda growth and,
there's
it's sorta like
there's
it
still
it
a
invites
lot
people.
of work though. Okay.
Well, I'm sure,
Because
but
you're
but
working in poor rural communities, but yes, it is. Yes,
what's
it's happening
exciting is
slowly.
that you're showing that it's possible,
Yeah.
right? And that's the thing
And
that
we're
I
doing
think
it
is
in an area in Mexico where it doesn't get any attention. You talk about areas where philanthropy goes to, and it goes into Oaxaca or it goes into, all these different states. Nobody goes into Guerrero where we are. So the fact that we are creating this, point of light to attract all these other points of light into an area
Mhm.
that is so dark for so
Yeah.
long, I think is also
Yeah.
something that I'm very proud of.
Well, I just wrote down a couple little points here on the from the Reservoir website of some of the remarkable achievements you've accomplished it through this resort. 18 local producers engage in regenerative agriculture. 10,417 sea turtle hatchlings released this year. 34 students supported through the Adopt a Student program. 2,200 water monitoring results. 12,893 sea turtle eggs protected. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, honestly. Like when I was reading that website, I was like, okay, I got to keep it. I got to keep it succinct, but I'm encouraging all of my listeners to go to the Playa Viva website, read about it, and I'm going to include it on my show notes, but and the Reservoir website to read about that, and um, and all these different programs that you have. How what are some of the other kinds of programs that that you've created where my listeners, if they're interested, they can go and learn more or potentially support, just even from afar.
Yeah.
And
Well, there's also on YouTube a couple of wonderful little like 5 minute films about the Women's Co-op and Resimar and the work that's being done. It's, when you're doing work at a watershed level and restoring a watershed, there's so many different touch points. We've divided into 5 core nodes from a regenerative standpoint, which are water, education, marine life, which includes the turtle sanctuary, sustainable fisheries, and mangroves eventually. Um, uh, the permaculture, which is now kind of expanding and spinning off what we'll call, let's say, gender, because the women's co-op started there, but has really become almost a node all of its own. And then general protected areas, and we just discovered jaguar and jaguar traps. Like, our team would like to raise money to buy not jaguar traps, but camera traps, so that we can actually get photographs of the animals and where they are and identify them. So, each one of those, somebody wants to buy one of those, that'd be great. It's, you know, there's so many ways that they can help out. I mean, we're doing a spay and neuter program as well to reduce street dogs and cats and have a much more controlled, healthy environment for dogs and cats. So yes, there's so many things happening when you work at a watershed level. Luckily, it's a micro watershed. I think it's like 86 square miles. But the idea being, just like with Playa Viva, creating a model for how you can work at a watershed level, and then just the only difference between the big deals and little deals is number of zeros next to them, and so scale like anything
yeah,
else. So
how much of your project has had government involvement and subsidization and these kinds of things?
we don't rely on the government in at all. We've had limited support when we got the Fitur award for tourism in Spain. That was all done by the State of Guerrero Tourism Office, and Oscar, who saw us and said, "Wow, I think you guys should submit." And lucky to win that prestigious award. But we don't depend on the government for the work that we do.
Okay. Okay. Well, as with anything in life, it's just nice to have, the community support and other like-minded people who share your passions to, kind of be on the journey with you, especially in something so, you know, in in this kind of a regenerative development. Can you talk a bit about the formation of regenerative travel, and this global platform that you've created for others who are doing what you're doing?
Yes, the regenerative travel origin story starts with Pam Page. Pam and her family, 2 daughters and their kids, would come to Playa Viva every other year, and they were like, "We love what you're doing here, and you check all my boxes, even boxes we didn't know we had, and now you've ruined us, and we can't go anywhere else, but we want to go somewhere else in those odd years. Where are the Playa Vivas of the world?" And
Yeah.
who are you tracking? And that really was the genesis of it, saying, realizing that if Pam and family wanted to know where the Playa Vivas of the world were, there were other people like them. And the genesis was regenerative travel as this platform for economies of scale in sales and marketing and PR for similar hotels like Playa Viva. As we called the hotels in together and started meeting and talking, what became evident was it wasn't just the economies of scale, but it was also the sharing of best practices. And how are
Okay.
you dealing with gray water systems? How are you, you know, training your chef on farm to table program? Blah 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 blah. And so, and then the next part of that vision was legacy and liquidity. As um, we saw, early hotels, they just want help in filling their rooms. So that's the economies of scale. Once they're kind of full, they just want to be better at their game. They want to be at the top of the game. And so they want the sharing of best practices. But then as they start to mature out and, maybe my kids don't want Playa Viva someday, how do we sell it back to the community but stay involved in it or get outside investors, et cetera? So legacy and liquidity is really the next big phase for regenerative travel. Amanda Ho came in uh, and said this is something she wanted to do and really took it over and is the CEO of the organization. She's formed a really strong board around her with
Hmm.
other members of this community and expanded regenerative travel beyond just the hotels to really the entire ecosystem. And if you're truly regenerative, you're really not about one thing, but you're about that whole systems approach. So she's brought
Sure.
travelers, travel agency, travel designers into the mix, and DMOs, and other key stakeholders into it. So I
Hmm.
really honor her for that. She's done a great job with the branding. She's a branding just galore, and so really made the RT imprimatur highly valuable, and I appreciate her work there.
Wow. Um, do you think that there's another regenerative resort for you in the future?
I do hope so. I'm working with Miguel Bravo out of the Baja area in
Hmm.
identifying different properties, and we're having regular meetings with folks who approach me about, how do they build a Playa Viva, and looking for partners in development and operation. And so, yeah, I do hope that we can expand the impact of what we're doing and create some economies of scale along that and share our best practices.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Well, as we get ready to land this plane, I wanted to ask you, um, what does it look like for you to be continually, recharging your own kind of self and your own creative energy and so that you can keep crafting these worlds of regeneration and kind of bring a whole self into the process.
Yeah. Well, I talk about one of the things I love about Playa Viva is that every day there is like a TED Talk. The people that are attracted to that place are absolutely marvelous, absolutely fantastic, and cover a broad spectrum. It's not just one socioeconomic, it is across the board. And so I love that about that place. And that really recharges me, how people have connected to what we're doing and the types of people that are attracted to it. I love that. Obviously, seeing the changes in the community and the people, we did a quinceañera, our 15th anniversary, and I spent some time interviewing some of our longer lasting staff and hearing them talk about how they have become more conscious and they're moving along this path, and they're beginning to uh, express that triple ripple to have that impact their community and where they are. That
Mhm.
recharges my batteries completely. And then again, other people who call me up and are like, Playa Viva, you guys are the OG of, regenerative travel. And, we want to do something like you've done, but in our way. And obviously Playa Viva is unique because of where it is, and from a regenerative standpoint, it needs to be exactly that. Um, so in all those levels, it does kind of go, wow, you know, we, Sandra and I, did something that aligned with our values, and it's resonating, um, and it's wonderfully surprising and something to be
Yeah.
thankful for.
Yeah. Wow. So you all just recently celebrated 15 years?
Well, actually, we're now starting season 17 in October. So,
That's
yeah, we did our quinceañera. We had our sweet 16. You know, what is 17? I am 16 going on 7. I mean, yes,
That's amazing.
18, we can vote. 21, we're legal. I don't know. But
Yeah.
yes, we're getting out of those teenage years and becoming quite a little adult here. So.
Well, and it's kind of and it goes back to, maybe in a little more business sense, it's not this sense of what I haven't picked up from you in our conversation is this need for this immediate financial ROI. Would you say that that's an accurate? I mean, I don't know if it's a need, but maybe it's not the decisions you're making were not based off of I want the immediate ROI of all of my investment, and maybe it's a different outlook on whatever ROI even meant for you, and maybe you were redefining what ROI was.
Well, at the end of the day, this is a business, and
Mhm,
we need heads and beds. We need
mhm,
to be a hospitality business that has positive cash flow. I think the
mhm,
question is, as you said about ROI, is the extractive model versus the reinvesting in and the
mhm.
long term benefits to our investors in this project. And luckily, our investors are looking out for the long term and not looking at short term ROI.
Yeah, yeah, the long term. It's the long game. I feel like you're not just doing a marathon, you're doing like an Ironman 4 or 5 times over.
Hey, go easy on me. All right.
Well, David, I have, from the moment we first met, now 4 or 5 years ago till present day, I've been just following, the trajectory of Playa Viva, all that you're doing. And I'm just continually am inspired by, you know, the choices you've made. They're not always maybe the most convenient or easy. It's you know, most people would prefer the path of least resistance, but you are getting right in there, and it has definitely been an inspiration for me, that in my life, how can I make different choices that are supporting the values? And like you said, that when you're working, maybe the payoff isn't right away, but you begin to see that as you're living in alignment with the values, that you are bringing transformation and results in the world around you. So thank you for being that inspiration to me, and I hope to my listeners. So grateful for your time. I know you're extremely busy, and
Well, Sharon, thank you for inviting me to be on. Thank you for sharing the Playa Viva story and the work that we're having in the environment. Because yes, it is still a business. We still need, your listeners to want to come and experience what Michelin gave us 2 keys about, but also experience why we got the highest B Corp rating at the time when we got our B Corp rating for the impact that we have and the alignment in values. So thank you for telling our story, Sharon. I appreciate it.
oh, my pleasure. It is really a remarkable story, and I hope everyone. I'll put the links to all of the different companies that the Playa Viva and the Reservoir and the Regenerative Travel in my show notes. And I hope people will continue to go on their own journey of discovering a whole new way of doing business and hospitality. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks for listening. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to join our creative tribe. Follow, like, and subscribe to help this community grow. Your support helps me to tell the stories of the creatives who bring soul to our world and create meaningful experiences. Thank you for being here and keeping the circle of creativity alive and connected. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you.